At this time, I'd like to invite Brother Faisal for recitation of Quran with Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لما تقولون ما لا تفعلون كبر مقتا عند الله أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلون إن الله يحب الذين يقاتلون في سبيله صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص. وإذ قال موسى لقومه يا قوم لما تؤذونني وقد تعلمون أني رسول الله إليكم فلما زاغوا أزاغ الله قلوبهم والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. وإذ قال عيسى ابن مريم يا بني إسرائيل إني رسول الله إليكم مصدقا لما بين يدي من التوراة ومبشرا برسول يأتي من بعد اسمه أحمد. فلما جاءهم بالبينات قالوا هذا سحر مبين ومن أظلم ممن افترى على الله الكذب وهو يدعى إلى الإسلام والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون. هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم تؤمنون بالله ورسوله وتجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالكم وأنفسكم ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. يغفر لكم ذنوبكم ويدخلكم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ومساكن طيبة في جنات عدن ذلك الفوز العظيم. وأخرى تحبونها نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا أنصار الله كما قال عيسى ابن مريم للحواريين من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله فآمنت طائفة من بني إسرائيل فآمنت طائفة من بني إسرائيل وكفرت طائفة فأيدنا الذين آمنوا على عدوهم فأصبحوا ظاهرين صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Faisal. At this time, I'd like to invite Brother Hassan Abbas Kanani for recitation of poetry with Allah Salvat.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. یوں رو رہے ہیں دیکھ کے زینب کو مرتضیٰ، یوں رو رہے ہیں دیکھ کے زینب کو مرتضیٰ، شاید خیال آیا ہے بازار شام کا، یوں رو رہے ہیں دیکھ کے زینب کو مرتضیٰ، زینب کے تھے یہ بین مدینے چلو حسین، زینب کے تھے یہ بین مدینے چلو حسین، کوفہ ہمارے رہنے کے قابل نہیں رہا، یوں رو رہے ہیں دیکھ کے زینب کو مرتضیٰ، سجاد بین کہتے ہیں دادا ہے خوش نصیب، سجاد بین کہتے ہیں دادا ہے خوش نصیب، بیٹوں نے مل کے باپ کو غسل و کفن دیا، یوں رو رہے ہیں دیکھ کے زینب کو مرتضیٰ، ایک بی بی چل رہی ہے جنازے کے ساتھ ساتھ، ایک بی بی چل رہی ہے جنازے کے ساتھ ساتھ، لگتا ہے قبر چھوڑ کے آئی ہے فاطمہ، یوں رو رہے ہیں دیکھ کے ज़ैनब को मुर्तज़ा और दरबार शाम जाऊंगा ज़ैनब मैं तेरे साथ दरबार शाम जाऊंगा ज़ैनब मैं तेरे साथ अकबर ये कह के हो गए खामोश मुर्तज़ा पर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
Jazakallah khair, Brother Hassan Abbas Kanani. One more loud salawat for him, please. Respected sheikhs, elders, brothers of faith, and brothers and sisters of faith, assalamu alaikum. Before I invite the sheikh to ascend the member, just a few announcements. We would like to remind the parents of toddlers in our community about our dedicated mother's room. This room has a live feed of the program. It has been set up so that the toddlers can be accompanied by their mothers and the young ones can get accustomed to listening and sitting to the program in a lighter, less restrictive setting. With this, we hope to bring ease to all of us in these upcoming nights and help keep noise at a minimum during the program and the amals. Just a reminder that our objective at CFK is to serve all of our guests adequately while being morally responsible by minimizing wastage. We thank you for doing your part in helping us to achieve this objective by pre-registering using the links present on our WhatsApp and email announcements. We require your help to maintain our tradition of no active fundraising. Please consider sponsoring nights like tonight and the upcoming nights of Ramadan. We also request you to consider becoming sustaining members with recurring monthly contributions. A few upcoming events. This Friday evening at 10:30, CFK will host the Seekers Club with Sheikh Amin. The topic will be Divine Mercy. We will also be having a program after CFK Dua Iftitah, at CFK after Dua Iftitah this upcoming Saturday, April 15th, called Moon Sighting, Rules, Application, and Maps with Sheikh Amin. Some few points that will be discussed will be: number one, what is the cause of different announcements of Eid, even from people who follow the same Maraja? Number two, what is the real difference between unity of horizon versus different horizons? Number three, when does sighting of the moon in a region necessitate its sighting in another? Number four, what do different curves in a map mean for different cities? Please note that this program will not be live streamed nor will be recorded. There will be a Sisters Iftar on April 18th at the DYG Lounge for the ages of 14 to 28. Please pre-register at dallasu.org/iftari. At this time, I'd like to invite Sheikh Mahdi to ascend the member to honor us with a speech for tonight and request all brothers and sisters to move as close to the member as possible, as more people will be coming in with Allahu salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Recite salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal faraj. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم محمد رسول الله والذين آمنوا معه أشداء على الكفار رحماء بينهم تراهم ركعا سجدا يبتغون فضلا من ربهم ورضوانا سيماهم في وجوههم من أثر السجود ذلك مثلهم في التوراة ومثلهم في الإنجيل كزرع أخرج شطأه فآزره فاستغلظ فاستوى على سوقه يعجب الزراع ليغيظ بهم الكفار وعد الله الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات منهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Tonight, inshallah, we'll be delving into the characteristic of Ali ibn Abi Talib that in many ways is the foundation for all of the other virtues that Ali possesses. And that characteristic is the worship of Ali and the ibadah of Ali and the type of relationship that he has with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the first night we discussed the zuhd of Ali, the way he distances himself from the pleasures of this world. And this is only possible because of the type of relationship that he has with his Lord. On the second night, we talked about the justice of Ali and the fact that he constantly sees someone watching him, constantly sees someone holding him accountable. And this is only possible because of the relationship that he has with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And last night, we discussed the compassion of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the kindness that he used to show. And this is also only possible because of the relationship that Ali has built with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the very foundation of all of these other characteristics that we look at Ali for and we praise him for, and rightfully so, lies the foundation of his worship and his ibadah and the relationship that he has built with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this worship is seen in his life to such an extent that you find in narrations that we will discuss that even other ma'sumeen and other infallibles, when they used to look at the worship of Ali, they used to look at the ibadah of Ali, they were astonished by it, and they could not even understand how is it that our great-grandfather was able to be the commander that he was, to be able to be the khalifa that he was, and at the same time to be the worshipper and the abid that he was. Hence you find the worship of Ali is the foundation to all of the other badges of honor that Ali ibn Abi Talib has. And therefore tonight we will take some time to delve into this characteristic and this aspect of the character of Amirul Mu'mineen. And in order to do so, we'll pose the following questions. Number one, what did Imam Ali tell us about the strength that he used when he wanted to tear off the gates of Khaybar and use it as his shield? Was this strength that he got through his muscles and through his body, or did this strength come from a foundation that Ali had built in his character? Number two, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describe in verse 29 of Surah Al-Fath, in verse 48, Surah 48, how does he describe for us the companions of the Prophet? What is their sign? If you were to be around them, if you were to see them, what is the characteristic that stands out about the special companions of the Holy Prophet? Number three, why did the Ahlul Bayt worship in ways that you and I might look at and find to be a bit extreme? And what was their state of mind when they used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ways that are difficult for us to understand? And their legs were inflamed, and they would cry so much that their eyelids had become wounded. What was their state of mind when they did this type of worship? Number four, out of the many acts of worship that we have in Islam, which of these acts of worship is it that the Ahlul Bayt emphasize to us more than anything else? And which part of that act of worship is the pinnacle and the climax and the most important part of this act of worship? And number five, and finally, what did Imam Ali say to his companion by the name of Nawf in the middle of the night, as he witnessed Ali does not sleep during nighttime, and he is busy worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And Ali shared with him of the beauty of building a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the night time. Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 5 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad. Let us begin from here. We know that Ali had many characteristics that shined very bright. The reality is all of these characteristics at the end of the day came down to the worship of Ali and the relationship that he had built with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he's kind to the orphans, it is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him to do so, and he has a relationship with this Lord of his. If he is just and he sees God watching over him every second, it's because he's built a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's worshipped this Lord so much that he feels the presence of this Lord constantly. If he's compassionate, it's the same thing. All of these lie on the foundation and stand on the foundation of the worship of Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is why you find in the Battle of Khaybar, when Ali did something that many others might have been absolutely astonished by, where his shield fell on the ground. And the people who were there, and at that time were Jewish people who had broken their peace treaty with the Prophet, started to attack him from every corner. And he says, I looked at the gate of Khaybar, and I pulled the gate of Khaybar, and I started to use the gate of Khaybar as my shield. In these moments, as he is retelling this story, a companion of his asked, said, Ya Ali, when you took the gate of Khaybar, that some narrations say others would come, 5, 6, 7, 10 people would come to try to move this gate, and it was difficult. Ya Ali, did you feel any of the weight of this gate? And Ali responded, he said, no, it had the same weight that my normal shield had when I used to fight with it. And hence you look at this and you say, Ya Ali, you're so strong, you're so brave, you're such a warrior, so on and so forth. And Ali himself has said in narrations that if I tore the gate of Khaybar, I didn't do it through my muscles, and I didn't do it through this weak body of mine that eats bread made of barley, yes, and barely has any food other than salt and bread. He said, I pulled it through the strength that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to me. So Ali is saying, if I can do that in the battlefield, that strength is coming from where? It's coming from my worship. What I do on the battlefield, it comes from what I do in the middle of the night when no one else is watching. This is what Ali is teaching us. He said, I tore the gate of Khaybar with a strength of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بِقُوَّةٍ رَبَّانِيَّةٍ. I didn't do it just because I was strong and I was brave. It's my worship and the relationship that I built with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why Ali is able to do the things that he is able to do. And hence you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the companions of the Prophet, and he says, listen, If there's one thing that's going to stand out about these companions of the Prophet, and Ali of course is at the forefront of these companions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Fath, if you see them, you will see tarahum rukka'an sujjada. These are people who are not doing ruku and doing sajda. That would have been raki'an. It says rukka'an. They are constantly doing ruku'. They are constantly worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sujjadan. They're constantly in sajda towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يَبْتَغُونَ فَضْلًا مِّن رَبِّهِمْ وَرِضْوَانًا. They're constantly looking to benefit from the blessings of their worship. Yes? And then the Quran says, سِيمَاهُمْ فِي وُجُوهِهِمْ مِنْ أَثَرِ السُّجُودِ. If you see them, you will see that their foreheads and their worship has left some marks on their body. So when He describes for us the special companions of the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that thing that stands out about them is that they are people of deep worship. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. And He says, ذَلِكَ مَثَلَهُمْ فِي التَّوْرَاتِ. This is how we have spoken about them in the Tawrat. So in the Torah, when we told people that Muhammad is going to come, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, this is how we describe the companions of that man who's going to come. وَمَثَلُهُمْ فِي الْإِنْجِيلِ. And in the Injil, we spoke of them as those people whose numbers are small, but they quickly grow and they become very strong, very quickly. People think they can wipe them out, but all of a sudden, the companions of the Prophet are a thing now. You have to deal with them now. And it's almost as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, if they reach that point where they have that solidarity and that they are that strong, it is because of this worship that they do. It is because of tarahum rukya'an sujjada. They've built this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, brothers and sisters, is one of the key points that we're going to make tonight. Because when you look at the Ahlul Bayt, you find that the spirituality that they spoke of was not a spirituality where you are simply kind to other people, nice to other people, charitable to other people, you have a pure heart. This is good. These are the fruits of spirituality. This is a delicate point. These are the fruits of spirituality. In the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt, in order to get to those fruits, first you need a foundation. This foundation is your relationship with God. If you were to go around today and tell people, what does it mean to be a good Muslim? What does it mean to be a good person? They'll say it means you have good akhlaq with people, you're charitable, you're kind to your parents, so on and so forth. And this is all true. This is all part of being a good person. But Islam sees those as the fruits of spirituality. Islam says beneath these fruits, you need a foundation. That foundation is the relationship you build with God through worship. Because if you have a strong relationship with Him, and this is the important point here, if you have a strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means you have a better understanding of who He is, His power, His authority, you will understand that He is the one who has to call the shots in your life and not you. And if you understand this, then your ego starts to make way for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will. Yes? And when you understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who calls the shots in your life, then this ego of yours is either weakened, hopefully in our cases, or like the Ahlul Bayt, it's completely wiped out. It's almost like it doesn't exist anymore. When this happens, you become a source of all khair and all virtues and all goodnesses in the world. There's a foundation to it. Yes, a normal person can go out there and give charity. Yes, this is good. A normal person can go out there and have good akhlaq. This is good. The spirituality that Islam taught you and I to build is a spirituality that has a foundation. The foundation of that spirituality is that you don't see yourself in the picture anymore. You see God running the show. And when He's running the show and He tells you, have good akhlaq with your parents. If your ego is weak and you can control your ego, immediately you will have good akhlaq with your parents. If He tells you be charitable, because your ego is not going to stop you anymore, immediately you will become what? you will become charitable. If he tells you be brave on the battlefield like he told Ali, because the ego is not there, immediately he is what? He is brave on the battlefield. All of these doors of different virtues only open the doors to the human being when he has a foundation of worship and he sees himself as a servant. Otherwise, this person, he can act spiritual, but at the end of the day, when he wants to do the right thing, his ego will come in and ruin everything. I want to be nice to my family. Okay, great. Islam will tell you, if you want to really do a good job with this, work on that ego of yours. Remind yourself, you're not in charge of them. You don't own them. You're not the number one person here. God is the number one person. And God has told you, you don't have all the rights, only these rights. And because your ego is no longer in the way, you can say, yes, my wife has her rights, my children have their rights, so on and so forth. But if your ego gets in the way, they can tell you all you want about the rights of other people, yes? Then when it really comes down to doing it, your ego gets in the way. And you say, yes, I hear you, but what about me? I'm supposed to call the shots here. And Islam doesn't look at spirituality like that. And this is becoming more and more of a trend in our communities, and I'll talk more about this. Where we want the fruits of spirituality, we don't want the foundation. And we assume spirituality is just be a good person, pure heart, yes, be a nice person, these are the fruits of spirituality. There's a foundation to it. To get to those fruits, you need this foundation. You need to understand that you have no authority. Only then, whatever virtue Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points to, will you move towards. Otherwise, your ego will be the number one character in this show. And it will never let you to fully take on virtues. Because every time you want to do it, your ego will not like it. A desire will pop up and you will not like it. And this is why Ahlul Bayt emphasize this so much. Look at these nights of Qadr. Why do we come in the nights of Qadr? If the nights of Qadr are about becoming good people, why doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, listen, forget about building a relationship with me, forget about talking to me, forget about worship, a'mal, all of it. Just go and give a lot of charity on this night. Charity is a big act of worship on the nights of Qadr, huh? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, yes, give that charity, but build a relationship with me. Because at the end of the day, if your ego is constantly going to get in the way, this charity is not going to last long. When it really comes down to it, your ego will get in the way, it'll stop you. You want a true foundation? Do your charity, but build a relationship with me. Teach yourself that you're the servant, I'm the master. Why is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us, for example, go to Hajj? Why go to Hajj? All of this, how much money is spent on Hajj every year? If you accumulate all of it amongst Muslims, yes, maybe in the trillions of dollars. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala go to Hajj? And then when you go there and you walk around this house, yes, and you wear this clothing, yes, then do qurbani. Ya Allah, I'll just do qurbani here. What's the problem? Because that qurbani, yes, you can do, but the foundation of your spirituality is you knowing you're not in charge. Hence, you have to go walk around that house. You have to humble yourself. This is a foundation that Ahlul Bayt teach us about spirituality. Otherwise, yes, why all of this extra actions? Just go, be charitable, have good akhlaq. No, this is good, but this is a superficial level of spirituality compared to what Ahlul Bayt taught us, where it cuts deeper into who you are, it does surgery on your ego, and then when you come out of that surgery, then yes, every virtue, not only those virtues that you kind of like to do, every virtue, you will be able to embrace them because there's no more ego anymore. And this is why you find Ali used to worship like this. There is no more ego left for Ali. This part we don't understand. This part we can't comprehend fully. There's no more ego left for Ali. Ego completely lost. This is a high standard. You and I just have to weaken that ego at least. Yes? That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from us. But this is why his worship was the way it was. So Abu Darda, companion of the Prophet, he says, I was walking one night in the palm trees, heading home, and I heard someone crying in the middle of the night. Darkness of the night. I saw someone is crying. He says, I looked closer. I said, this is Ali, he's crying. I looked a little bit closer. I saw the way he's crying is a way that I've never cried myself. He's crying as if God is going to throw him into hellfire right now. We're going to talk more about why Ahl Bayt worship like this. He says, I listened to him, the way he was pleading to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way he was talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it was quite astonishing for me. He says, I continued to listen, all of a sudden I found the sound cut off. What happened to Ali? He said, I came closer, I saw Ali has fainted. I ran home to the house of Ali, knocked on the door to tell Fatima, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha. I went there to tell Fatima quickly, your husband, he fell on the ground, he's fainted, you have to come do something. He says, when I came and told Fatima, I said, he fainted. And Fatima said, yes, this is what happens to him every night. This is normal for Ali, because he faints out of what he sees of the beauty and the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the worship of Ali. There's no more ego left in this man. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, go left, he'll go left. Tells him, go right, go right. Go straight, go straight. It doesn't matter what God tells Ali. Because he's removed his ego, now everything is open. God just tells him what virtue he wants to see in him, and it's a done deal. That's it. And Ali continued on this. For you and I, if we can just weaken our ego, yes, through our worship. But with Ali, he went to the next step. He continued on this. And this is why you find the narration says, when the time of salat used to come, he would start in wudu, start to go pale. And they asked him, Ya Ali, why are you going pale? He said, I'm going to meet the one who gave me this opportunity of life. So he saw things you and I didn't see. And this is why Ali has that famous line that many of us have heard. He said, yes, people who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are of three groups, yes? We've heard this narration. He said, there are those who worship in the hopes of heaven. فَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ التُّجَّارِ. This is how the businessmen do worship, yes? And he said, there are those who worship out of fear of hellfire, and I hope I'm in that category, because I know I'm not in any other category. He said, this is ibadatul abid. This is the worship of the servants, the people who are afraid of punishment, yes? And he said, there are those who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for himself. And this is the worship of the special servants of God and the free servants of God. Ibadatul ahrar. But if you want to do that type of worship, that means you don't even have an ego left anymore. You don't even see yourself. So what do you see? You see God and you see him worthy of worship. That's it. And anytime you think you fall into this third category, I have bad news. More likely than not, we don't fall under this third category. The overwhelming majority of people who've ever lived and will ever live will not fall under this category. But Ali was in this category. And you see how beautiful it was. He was in this category and all the way at the top. So you find even other ma'asumeen, when they used to look at the ibadah of Ali, they used to look at it and wonder, how does Ali worship like this? So Imam al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says, I came to see my father one day. This is Zainul Abidin, yes? This is the one who is known for his worship. He says, I came and I walked in. The moment I walked in, I saw him. He had been worshiping for so long, his color had gone pale. And his legs were inflamed because he was standing for so long. And he had cried so much that his eyelids were somewhat wounded. He says, the moment I saw this, I was affected emotionally. This is such an emotional moment to see. He says, when I came and saw my father looked at me. He told me to be calm. And then he said, listen, I do all of this worship, but this is nothing compared to the worship of Ali. He said, go and bring those papers that are over there, those documents. I brought those documents. These are narrations about what Ali used to do from history. He looked at it and he said, you know, which one of us will be able to do what Ali did? This is the fourth Imam. And we look at that and we find this is extreme. Why does an imam cry until a point where his eyelids are wounded and his legs are inflamed and all of this kindness? Why would someone, we ask ourselves this, why would someone put themselves through this difficulty? Crying, worshiping like this. But when you're in that state of mind where your ego is completely gone, you don't even see yourself anymore, it's not so much trying to put yourself through that pain. It's just that you're worshiping, you're so in awe of this worship, this stuff naturally happens. This is the natural consequence of it. You want to understand, I'll give you an example. You can completely understand why Ahl Bayt, when they used to worship, they have descriptions of it that seem extreme to us, and they are. But you'll understand their state of mind. I'll give you an example of someone who's not spiritual at all. Furthest thing from spirituality. The Quran tells us the story of Yusuf, no? And in the story of Yusuf, what happened? Zulaykha had that evil intention. She pushed for it. Yusuf ran. All of this kind of stuff. When everything came to an end, what happened? Zulaykha started to hear the chit-chat of the women, the other women in the city. They said, yes, Zulaykha's obsessed. And they started to blame her. Zulaykha has fallen in love with this person, this young man who's in her house. He's a servant for them. She's fallen in love with him and all this kind of stuff. And what did Zulaykha do? Zulaykha knew her stuff. Zulaykha pulled off a very beautiful plan. She said, okay, فَلَمَّا سَمِعَتْ بِمَكْرِهِنَّ, when she heard, said, okay, you guys are going to talk about me like this? Let me give you a taste of what it's like being around Yusuf. فَلَمَّا سَمِعَتْ بِمَكْرِهِنَّ أَرْسَلَتْ إِلَيْهِنَّ, he sent for them, brought them. وَأَعْتَدَتْ لَهُنَّ مُتَّكَأً, she prepared for them places where they could sit and pillows and so on and so forth, comforters. This is a luxurious palace. وَآتَتْ كُلَّ وَاحِدَةٍ مِّنْهُنَّ سِكِّينًا, and he gave a knife. She gave a knife to each one of them. وَقَالَتْ اخْرُجْ عَلَيْهِنَّ, and Zulaykha said, Yusuf, go. And what happened when Yusuf walked out? All of a sudden, فَلَمَّا رَأَيْنَهُ أَكْبَرْنَهُ, they saw Yusuf, they said, oh my God. وَقُلْنَا حَاشَى لِلَّهِ, they said, no, this is not possible. مَا هَذَا بَشَرًا, this is not a human being. And then what does the Quran tell us? وَقَطَّعْنَا أَيْدِيَهُنَّ, yes, they started to cut their own hands. If you are walking by a group of people and saw them cutting their hands, wouldn't you look at that and say, this is extreme, what are you doing? Why would you hurt yourself like this? And what would the women of Egypt tell you? They will say, listen, you don't know what we're witnessing. We're not even acknowledging ourselves right now. We don't even understand what's happening. Our eyes are in awe of Yusuf, and hence we cut our hands. It's not that we want to cut our hands. It's that naturally our state of mind is somewhere else. We're so in awe, we don't even understand we're cutting ourselves. And this was a servant of God. So then Ali would come and witness of the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we say, why was his eyelids wounded? Why was he doing this? Baba, he doesn't see himself anymore. He doesn't cry to wound his eyelids. He cries and he's so much in awe that if the eyelids get wounded, if the knees get hurt, he doesn't even understand sometimes. This is the state of mind that they had. Yes, Ahl Bayt are not expecting this kind of stuff from you, and Ahl Bayt are expecting very, very, very small from us. But they set the standard. Hence you find Ahl Bayt, they emphasize this issue. Your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will dictate everything else in your life. So you find Ali ibn Abi Talib constantly made time for his worship. When he was taking the seeds and the kernels of the dates to plant them so that they would turn into palm trees, so that he could grant these away as charity, the narration says every time he planted one of them, 2 rakat salat. This is part of his lifestyle. At night, they say, in his house, the 6th Imam says, in his house, he had a special place of worship for himself. And when he was taking care of the kids, does that ring a bell for anyone? When he was taking care of the kids as the father in the house, he would bring the little kids with him. They would sleep there, and he would do his worship there. It was built into his life. What is the lesson for you and I? The lesson for you and I is that if you see the beauty of the character of Ali, you cannot take that beauty without his worship. And you and I have to learn to make time for worship. You can't be as brave as Ali was without the salats. You can't be as charismatic as he was, as compassionate as he was without the worship. You and I, and this is a trend in our communities and in our younger generation, they look at Ali and they praise him and they think he's wonderful. Yes, they want everything Ali had and they aspire to everything that Ali had, but they forget about the foundation that Ali built. This is his foundation. You build this foundation, you set your ego aside, then you will become a source of all goodness and of all khair. And out of all of these acts of worship that you find Ahl Bayt emphasize for us, maybe none of them they emphasize as much as they emphasize salat. And hence you find in the words of Ali, he keeps going back to salat, salat, salat. Do you pray? Do you do your salat? For them, their salat was on a different level. For you and I, at the very least, we can't be cutting corners on obligations. We can't be sitting there and saying, yes, now it's difficult. I can't do this one today. No, that's not how it works. This is your foundation. So Ali is writing to Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr to send him to be in charge of Egypt. He's going to become his governor. Now, when you're the governor, what do? You deal with people's taxes, you deal with their affairs, you do all of this kind of stuff. And in this letter that he's writing to Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, and all of the advice that he's giving to him, then he turns to him and he says this. He says, "Wandur ila salatik." You're going to be the governor, you better pray a good prayer. Your salat needs to be top-notch. Because people will be following you, people look at you, you're the standard, you have to do your salat properly. And then he continues and he says, and your wudu should better be a good wudu too. And he said, your wudu is a big part of your faith. Wudu is the preparation for salat. And the Imam says this is a big part of your faith. Then he said, when you go to your ruku and sajda, you better do a good job with your ruku and sajda. And then he said this, and this is a lesson for you and I. He said, فَجْعَلْ كُلُّ شَيْءٍ, and make everything else, and know that everything else تَبَعٌ لِصَلَاتِكَ. Everything else follows your salat. Every other act of worship follows salat. He said the one who messes up on his salat, he will mess up on other things even greater, even bigger. Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr is a governor. In some ways, he's a politician. And Ali says, you better be careful how you pray. People are going to look at you. And this is why narrations tell us of the pros of someone who is a person who's constantly acquainted with salat, and the negativities of the one who does a poor job with his salat. If I don't pray consistently, this is my sign to start doing so. If I pray consistently, then this is my sign to start perfecting my salat. Yes? There's salat. You can do salat in whichever way you want. The Prophet said, 2 people from my ummah, they stand for salat. The difference between them is like the difference between the earth and the skies. This one, when he prays, God knows what's happening in his heart. He's paying attention to God 24/7. This one, when he prays, no, he said, Allahu Akbar, what do we have for iftar? There's a big difference between the two. By the way, if you're thinking that, I don't blame you. There's a big difference between the two. So on the pros, Ali said this, and this is another big lesson for you and I. He said, listen, salat is so important. It has that ability that when you are disconnected in your relationship with God, to quickly connect you again. You know what he's talking about? He's talking about that feeling you get in your stomach, yes, when you did something wrong. When you commit a sin, yes, and afterwards you come back and you know what you did is wrong. And you feel this hollowness inside of you because you know what you did. And you know your relationship with God has been severed. And what did Ali say? Ali said, listen, if you do a couple things, you're almost back on track. Don't worry about it. He said, when you commit a sin, If you come after it, number one, of course, tawbah. There's no doubt about that. Number one. And he said, but then if you add some salat afterwards, if you add a 2 rakat salat afterwards, you're really back on track now. You're getting a lot better. You're plugging back into that relationship again. This is the power of salat. He said, rak'atan, 2 rakas. And hence, when he used to see people doing a poor job with their salat and just Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, like we do, he looked at them and he told this man who was praying like this, naqara ka naqril qurab, he was pecking like the pecking of a crow. He said, listen, how long have you been praying like this? And this man said, I've always been praying like this. And he said, listen, you're missing out. He said, the person who steals the most, the greatest thief, is the one who steals salat from his own life. He said, this is the greatest thief. Huh? He said, don't pray like this. This is not how the Prophet taught us to pray. And in all of this prayer, there's one moment that is the absolute peak. It is the pinnacle. It's the most important part of your whole salat, and that is your sajda. And this is why you find narration after narration after narration that Ahl Bayt taught us that when you pray, prolong your sajda a little bit. Stay in sajda a little bit. This is the closest you are to God. This is when shaitan looks at you and regrets things the most, because he was asked to do the same sajda and he never did it. And hence when he sees you in sajda and you prolong this sajda, this distances you the most from shaitan. Hence you find in the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt, a sajda and a long sajda, a prolonged sajda was always part of their seerah. Because Ali knows when I prolong this sajda, if I'm really doing a good job with it, then the fruits of this spirituality will show up through his justice and compassion and hundreds of other virtues that you and I cannot count. This is where he builds the foundation. So his companion says, I entered into his house. I wanted to tell him something. I saw him, he's praying. I approached him. He pointed to me with his hands. So I'm praying. Ended his salat. I thought, great. Now he ended his salat. Then he went to sajda. This is the sajda after salat. And he stayed in sajda. And I said, فَوَاللَّهِ نَام. I'm sure he's asleep. This is how long he was in sajda. And the narration says, I went with the 4th Imam, Imam al-Sajjad, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. He says, I went with the 4th Imam and I saw him praying, and then he went to sajda and he stayed in sajda and he started to say adhkar and tasbih and tasbih. It reached the point where I saw everything around us is saying tasbih with us. This is the sajda of the Ahlul Bayt. And let this be what you take away from tonight. Let sajda be a part of your life. It doesn't even have to be a part of your salat. If it's part of your salat, you prolong it. If it's not even part of your salat, then what will you do? You will do this as a separate sajda. How many narrations do we have from Ahlul Bayt? They were walking, all of a sudden do sajda. But you're not praying right now. It's my obedience to God. It's my thankfulness to God. The nights of Qadr we are going through, maybe sometimes you just put your head down on the dirt, you do sajda, and just talk to God, and just think of what you want from Him, and all of this. And this is a strong way to build your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this relationship will then become the foundation for all of the other virtues that you and I are after. And this is why Nawf, the companion of the first Imam, he says, one night I had the opportunity to sleep and stay in the house of the first Imam. And it's interesting because there's a number of narrations that tell us of stories and incidents where companions had the opportunity to stay in the house of the Imam. It's happened with other companions, other Imams as well. So he says, I stayed that night in the house of Ali. And we laid down and he put down the comforter and he prepared everything for us and we went to sleep. Except I saw him, he's not going to sleep. He put me to sleep. Then he got up, I saw he doesn't stay in his home. He's worshiping left and right. He gets up in the middle of the night, he goes out, he looks at the sky. He speaks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he comes back in. Worship, gets up, goes back outside of the house. He only put me to sleep. He says, but I was watching this carefully. It's not very often you sleep in the house of the Imam, yes? I want to see what Ali does. He says, I watched him. At one point, Ali knew that I wasn't asleep. He turned to me, he said, Ya Nauf, أَنَائِمٌ أَنْتَ أَمْ رَاقِبُ أَمْ رَامِقٌ? Are you asleep or are you awake? He said, no, Ya Ali, I'm awake. And I was watching what you were doing. He said, no, imagine the words of Ali. This gives you goosebumps. If you're there and Ali is speaking these words to you in the middle of the night. He said, Ya Nauf, tuba lizzahidin. Good for those people who turn away from the dunya a little bit and they prepare for the akhirah. Prepare for the akhirah how? Ali's worship. This is the foundation for everything else. Tuba lizzahidin. Good for those who turn away from the dunya a little bit. They turn more towards the akhirah. And then Ali started to explain this to Nauf. He said, Nauf, you know how they do this? They live a simple lifestyle in this world, yes? And they take the Quran as part of their vocabulary and their shi'ar, meaning they're so acquainted with it. This is part of it. And they take the water on earth as their perfume. What does that mean? That means constantly they are using the water for what? For wudu. They are constantly acquainted with salat. He said, good for them. And this is why these days and nights where Ali is going through the pain that he is going through, and the family of Ali is going through the difficulties that they are going through, amongst those final wasiyas of Ali, of course, is his wasiyah when it comes to salat, and his wasiyah when it comes to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why in his final wasiyahs, when he was talking to his children, amongst the things that he encouraged his children about, amongst the things that he constantly talked to his children about, was Allah, Allah fi salat. My children, never forget salat. If we can dim the lights, we'll take our hearts to the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. As Ali is taking his final breaths, the narration says the pain of Ali had increased. And in those final moments, when he made his wasiyas to his children, then he turned to his children and he said, I also have some wasiyas, but these wasiyas are not about other people. These wasiyas are not about Ibn Muljam. I already told you about him. Give him from the food that you eat, and give him from the water that you drink, and do not strike him more than once, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not allowed us more than the one strike that he placed on my head. But Ali said, now I have a wasiyah about myself, my children. This wasiyah is about my kafan. Make sure my kafan is a simple kafan. This is the Ali who worked so hard for Islam. This is the Ali who gave everything for Islam. Thousands of dinars used to come in the hands of Ali. And the one thing he was worried about was that make sure my kafan is not an extravagant kafan. Make sure my kafan is not the type of kafan that the wealthy have. And he continued, he said, my children, when you carry my body, O Hassan, O Hussein, when you carry my body, you only have to carry one side of this tabut. Because I have been told that the angels will come and they will carry the other side of this tabut and move in the middle of the night. And my children, bury my body in the middle of the night. Why, Ya Ali? Why do you want to be buried in the middle of the night? Maybe because Ali wanted to be like his madloom wife, this wife of Ali, this daughter of the Prophet, who went through so much oppression, and she said, I don't want anyone to be praying on my body except for you, Ya Ali, and my close companions. And now Ali is following in the footsteps of Fatima, and Ali said, bury me during the night, and do not inform others of where you bury my body. This is the loneliness of Ali. This is the ghurbah of Ali. This is the betrayal that Ali went through with his people. And Hassan and Hussein are listening closely. And he said, when you take my body, let the camel move in the body until it reaches a point where the camel sits down. And when the camel sits down, you will find that that is where you are going to bury me. And that is also where Nuh is buried. And that is also where Adam is buried. Imagine the pain in the hearts of Hassan and Hussein and Zainab and Kulthum as they pick up the body of Ali in these final moments and they want to move it. But before that, Ali said something that broke their hearts. Ali said something in those final moments that brought pain to the hearts of these women and children. The narration says he was fainting and he was coming back. And he was fainting from the pain. And he was coming back until at one point he started to say salam in this room. And Hassan and Hussein turned towards Ali. They said, our father, no one entered into the room. Who are you giving salam to? No one else entered upon us. And Ali said, this is the Prophet. I see him and he is pointing at me. And he is telling me to come towards him. And this is my brother Ja'far. And this is my uncle. And in one narration he added, and this is my wife Fatima. They are all waiting for me to enter into heaven. Imagine what Hassan and Hussein went through when they carried the lifeless body of Ali in those final moments. They put it in the tabut and they move it towards the graveyard. What went through their hearts when they were pouring dirt on the body of Ali? What went through their hearts when they were burying one of the best men to ever live on earth? What went through their hearts when they knew that they had all become orphans and they wouldn't see their mother anymore and now they wouldn't see their father anymore? And imagine as they return back to this empty, cold house, and now the father of all of the orphans and the one who took care of all of the orphans in Kufa, now he has orphans of his own, and his own family is orphaned because of the betrayal of his own people. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين. Ya Hussein. 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 Ya Hussein.
زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. عباس کے آنسو پوچھتے ہیں, عباس کے آنسو پوچھتے ہیں, شبیر کو کچھ سمجھاتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. عباس کے آنسو پوچھتے ہیں, عباس کے آنسو پوچھتے ہیں, شبیر کو کچھ سمجھاتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. سر دیکھ کے زخمی بابا کا جب بیٹیاں رونے لگتی ہیں, سر دیکھ کے زخمی بابا کا جب بیٹیاں رونے لگتی ہیں. بچوں کو تسلی کی خاطر زہرا کا درد سناتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں. زخمی مولا کی آنکھوں میں زخمی مشکیزہ پھرتا ہے, عاشقیزہ پھرتا ہے عباس جری کے ہاتھوں سے قاتل کو جام پلاتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں پھرتا ہے نگاہوں میں منظر بازاروں کا درباروں کا پھرتا ہے نگاہوں میں منظر بازاروں کا درباروں کا کچھ دیر کو گئے کہ آنگن میں زینب کو ساتھ چلاتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں ایک روز اسی کوفے میں تمہیں بے پائیداروں کو لانا ہے ایک روز اسی کوفے میں تمہیں بے پائیداروں کو لانا ہے عابد کو لگا کے سینے سے بازار کا حال سناتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں جب نازک ہچکی آتی ہے زینب پہ نظر رک جاتی ہے جب نازک ہچکی آتی ہے زینب پہ نظر رک جاتی ہے اللہ تجھے آباد رکھے ہونٹوں سے دعا فرماتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں سر دیکھ کے زخمی بابا کا جب بیٹی رونے لگتی ہے سر دیکھ کے زخمی بابا کا جب بیٹی رونے لگتی ہے بچوں کو تسلی کی خاطر زہرا کا درد سناتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں پھرتا ہے نگاہوں میں منظر بازاروں کا درباروں کا پھرتا ہے نگاہوں میں منظر بازاروں کا درباروں کا گر دیر کو گئے کہ آنگن میں زینب کو ساتھ چلاتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں زینب کا چہرہ دیکھتے ہیں اور مولا روتے جاتے ہیں اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله وأن عليًا ولي الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله صلوات
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله وأنه حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربي الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا علي يا عظيم يا غفور يا رحيم. أنت الرب العظيم الذي ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. وهذا شهر عظمته وكرمته وشرفته وفضلته على الشهور، وهو الشهر الذي فرضت صيامه عليه، وهو شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان، وجعلت فيه ليلة القدر وجعلتها خيرا من 1000 شهر. فيا ذا المن ولا يمن عليك، من علي بفكاك رقبتي من النار فيما تمن علي، وأدخلني الجنة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله، أشهد أن عليا ولي الله وأنه حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر، إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد، الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربي. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم أدخل على أهل القبور السرور. اللهم أغني كل فقير. اللهم أشبع كل جائع. اللهم اكسو كل عريان. اللهم اغذ دينها كل مدين. اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب. اللهم رد كل غريب. اللهم فك كل أسير. اللهم أصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين. اللهم اشف كل مريض. اللهم سد فقرنا بغناك. اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك. اللهم اغض عنا الدين وأغننا من الفقر، إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل.
tip in the WhatsApp.
Brothers and sisters, if you could help us with cleanup, inshallah we'll be starting Dua Iftata at 9:15. If you could please help us with cleanup, we'll be starting Dua at 9:15. Per Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك، وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأقل يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وحلقة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها، على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله لا مضاد له في ملكه، ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه، ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره وحمده، الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يده، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه، ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما. إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير، مع حاجة بي إليه عظيمة، وغناك عنه قديم، وهو عندي كثير، وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي، وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي، وصفحك عن ظلمي، وسترك عن قبيح عملي، وحلمك عن كثير جرمي، عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي. أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك، الذي رزقتني من رحمتك، وأريتني من قدرتك، وعرفتني من إجابتك، فصرت أدعوك آمنا، وأسألك مستأنسا، لا خائفا ولا وجلا، مدلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك. فإن أبطأ عني عتبت بجهلي عليك، ولعل الذي أبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور. فلم أر مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لئيم منك علي. يا ربي إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك، وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك، كأن لي التطول عليك، فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك. فارحم عبدك الجاهل، وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك، إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك، مجري الفلك، مسخر الرياح، فالق الإصباح، ديان الدين، رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه، وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق، باسط الرزق، فالق الإصباح، ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بعد فلا يرى، وقرب فشهد النجوى، تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادل، ولا شبيه يشاكل، ولا ظهير يعاضد، قهر بعزته الأعزاء، وتواضع لعظمته العظماء، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أنادي، ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا أعصي، ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازي. فكم من موهبة هنيئة قد أعطاني، وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني، وبهجة مونقة قد أراني، فأثني عليه حامدا، وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه، ولا يغلق بابه، ولا يرد سائل، ولا يخيب آمل. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين، وينجي الصالحين، ويرفع المستضعفين، ويضع المستكبرين، ويهلك ملوكا، ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاسم الجبارين، مبير الظالمين، مدرك الهاربين، نكال الظالمين، صريخ المستصرخين، موضع حاجات الطالبين، معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها وترجف الأرض وعمارها وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق ويرزق ولم يرزق ويطعم ولا يطعم ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك، أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين، عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآياتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة سيدتي نساء العالمين، وصل على سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي، حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك، صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر، وحفه بملائكتك المقربين وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك، استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله، ومكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له، أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا، يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وأعزز به، وانصره وانتصر به، وانصره نصرا عزيزا، وافتح له فتحا يسيرا، واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله، وتذل بها النفاق وأهله، وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك، وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملناه، وما قصرنا عنه فبلغناه. اللهم المم به شعثنا، واشعب به صدعنا، وارتق به فتقنا، وكثر به قلتنا، وأعزز به ذلتنا، وأغني به عائلنا، واقضي به عن مغرمنا، واجبرنا به فقرنا، وسد به خلتنا، ويسر به عسرنا وبيض به وجوهنا وفك به أسرنا وأنجح به طلبتنا وأنجز به مواعيدنا واستجب به دعوتنا وأعطنا به سؤلنا وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا وأعطنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين واشفي به صدورنا وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله وغيبة ولينا وكثرة عدونا وقلة عددنا وشدة الفتن بنا وتظاهر الزمان علينا فصل على محمد وآله وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجل وبضر تكشف ونصر تعز وسلطان حق تظهر ورحمة منك تجللناها وعافية منك تلبسناها برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.